My mother-in-law threw the divorce papers across my kitchen table like she was tossing scraps to a stray dog. "Sign them, Mara," she said. Smiling so hard, her lipstick cracked at the corner. "Walk away clean. Or walk away with nothing." My husband stood behind her with his arms folded, staring at the floor like the floor had made vows to me instead of him. What none of them knew was that the money they had been living on for 8 years had never belonged to him. My name is Mara Whitaker. I was 34 years old then. A trust administration officer at a private bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I had spent my entire adult life reading the kind of documents most families only pretend to understand. Wills, beneficiary designations, distribution schedules, revocable trusts that turned irrevocable when somebody died. I knew how people hid greed behind words like legacy, family, and fairness. I just never thought I would watch my own marriage collapse under the weight of those words. The papers landed beside my coffee mug, still warm from the hand I had wrapped around it to stop myself from shaking. Across the table, my mother-in-law, Evelyn Whitaker, sat in my chair, as if she already owned my house, my marriage, and whatever was left of my dignity. Her diamond bracelet clicked against the wood when she tapped one manicured nail on the divorce packet. "Lee has suffered enough," she said. "You've dragged this family down long enough with your attitude." Lee did not look at me. That hurt more than the papers. He had always been weak around his mother. But weakness becomes cruelty when it keeps choosing the person who harms you. He was 37. Handsome in that polished, useless way men can be when other people's money has done all the hard work for them. He wore a navy sweater I bought him for Christmas, paid for with the paycheck he mocked when his mother wasn't in the room. Evelyn had never liked me because I did not flatter her son. I loved him once, but I did not worship him. That was my first crime. My second was having a job that required me to understand money better than he did. My third was knowing when to stay quiet. Quiet women scare families built on performance. They cannot tell whether you are weak, stupid, or simply waiting until the right moment to open the right drawer. 8 years earlier, I married Lee in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Asheville. Evelyn wore ivory to the wedding and told everyone it was champagne. She cried during the vows. Not because she was happy, but because she said she was losing her boy. At the reception, she pulled me aside near the restroom and whispered, "A wife can be replaced, Mara. A mother cannot." I laughed then because I thought she was dramatic. I did not know she was giving me the family rule book. Lee came from old Charlotte money. Or at least that was the story everyone repeated. The Whitakers had a brick house with white columns, a country club membership, portraits in gold frames, and the kind of relatives who said summer as a verb. But by the time I met Lee, most of that money existed as rumor and furniture. What kept them comfortable was a $1 million trust fund his late grandfather had established years ago. A trust, Lee spoke about, like it was his birthright. He called it my trust at dinner parties. Evelyn called it Lee's cushion. His cousins called it the reason Lee never panics. Every quarter, a distribution arrived, and Lee treated it like proof he was chosen by God and compound interest. He bought watches, paid club dues, leased cars, covered Evelyn's home repairs, and still complained when I asked him to contribute to our mortgage. "You're so obsessed with accounts," he used to say. "Not everything is a spreadsheet." The truth was, I did not need his trust money. I had bought our modest craftsman house in Plaza Midwood before we married, with a down payment from my own savings and a small inheritance from my father. It was not grand, but it was mine, in the way a home becomes yours when you paint the hallway yourself at midnight and know which floorboard creaks near the laundry room. Lee moved in with 2 suitcases and a framed diploma his mother carried inside like sacred art. For the first 2 years, I tried to make peace with Evelyn. I hosted Thanksgiving when she said her back hurt. I sent flowers on her birthday. I drove her to appointments after her cataract surgery because Lee had a golf weekend he called networking. Each kindness became a debt in her mouth. If I cooked, she said, I was trying too hard. If I worked late, she said, I was neglecting Lee. If I smiled, I was fake. If I stopped smiling, I was cold. The pattern became clear, slowly. The way mold appears in a corner you keep pretending is just a shadow. Evelyn would insult me in a soft voice, then accuse me of being sensitive when I reacted. Lee would say, "That's just Mom." As if a person being consistently cruel was a weather condition. Whenever I asked him to set boundaries, he sighed like I had asked him to cut off his own hand. "She's alone," he said. "She only has me." That was the sentence that kept me trapped the longest. She only has me. It made every boundary sound like violence. It made every request sound selfish. So I swallowed small humiliations until they became meals. Evelyn rearranged my kitchen cabinets while I was at work. She told Lee my clothes were too severe. She introduced me at a charity luncheon as the bank girl who keeps Lee grounded. People laughed politely. I smiled into my iced tea and tasted metal. Then Lee changed. Or maybe he stopped pretending. He quit his consulting job after a disagreement with a partner and said he needed time to recalibrate. 6 months became a year. A year became 3. He spent mornings at the gym, afternoons with Evelyn, evenings scrolling investment forums while I paid the bills and he lectured me about abundance. When quarterly trust distributions came in, he treated himself first and our life second. If money ran short, he blamed my scarcity mindset. I asked once, carefully, why he never used the trust to build something stable. A business. A retirement account. A plan. He looked offended. Almost wounded. My grandfather wanted me to enjoy my life, he said. Evelyn, who happened to be visiting, placed a hand on his shoulder and glared at me. Some women marry into a family and immediately start counting what they can take, she said. I remember the room going still. I remember Lee saying nothing. By the 7th year, I had learned to document without appearing to document. It was not because I planned revenge. It was because my job had taught me that memory becomes fragile when people with money begin rewriting events. I kept copies of mortgage payments. I saved emails where Lee promised to reimburse expenses and never did. I scanned receipts for repairs Evelyn demanded we make before her bridge club visited. I stored everything in a folder labeled house maintenance. Because boring names are safest. The trust remained the one subject Lee never let me near. That would have been fine if he had not used it as a weapon. Whenever we fought, he reminded me that he had family resources. Whenever I asked about debt, he told me not to worry because the trust always resets things. Whenever Evelyn wanted something, he paid her from distributions and told me I was cruel for asking questions. The trust was their crown, their shield, and their favorite leash. Then, 3 months before Evelyn threw the divorce papers at me, I received a call at work from a retired estate attorney named Mr. Calder. I knew him by reputation. Not personally. He had handled old money family structures for half of Charlotte before retiring to a lake house and sending holiday cards embossed with ducks. His voice was careful when he asked whether I was alone. I stepped into a conference room and closed the glass door. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said. "There is something you need to know about the Whitaker Trust." I almost told him I could not discuss a client matter if it involved my husband. Professional walls go up fast when you work around wealth. But he said the trust was not administered by my bank. And he was not calling about Lee. He was calling because his late partner had made an error years ago, not in the trust itself, but in what the family had been allowed to believe about it. "Your name appears in a controlling document," he said. "Not as a spouse. As the designated remainder owner." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles blanched. Mr. Calder explained that Lee's grandfather, Arthur Whitaker, had amended the trust shortly before his death after a private falling out with Evelyn and Lee's father. Lee was allowed income distributions under strict conditions, but the principal the actual $1 million body of the trust, was never his. If Lee failed certain responsibility clauses or attempted to dissolve the marriage for financial gain, control transferred to a separate family protection trust. And somehow, impossibly, I had been named trustee and beneficiary of that protection structure after Arthur met me during our engagement. I remembered Arthur Whitaker as a thin man in a wheelchair with bright eyes and a dry sense of humor. He had attended one Sunday lunch before he died. I watched Evelyn interrupt me 4 times, then asked me what I did for work. When I told him I worked in trust administration, he smiled and said, "Then you know families behave worst around money." I thought it was a joke. I did not know he was studying the room. I did not know he saw me before anyone else did. Mr. Calder sent me copies through a secure portal. I read them alone in my office after everyone left. The city lights blinking against the windows. The language was dense, old-fashioned, and brutal in its clarity. Arthur had not trusted his own family. He had built a mechanism to protect the assets from entitlement, waste, coercion, and marital abandonment. Lee could receive support, but he could not own the fund. Evelyn had no authority at all. And if Lee initiated divorce while misrepresenting ownership, his distributions could be suspended, pending trustee review. I did not confront him. That was the first decision that saved me. Rage begs to be seen. But strategy works better in silence. I met with my own attorney, Dana Rios, a woman with silver hair and the calmest voice I had ever heard. She reviewed the documents twice, then looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mara," she said, "your husband has been living off a trust he does not own, while letting his mother bully you with money she cannot touch." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Dana advised patience, not passivity. Patience. There is a difference. We gathered bank records, old messages, household ledgers, and the secure trust documents Mr. Calder had released. We confirmed the house was separate property. We confirmed Lee had contributed almost nothing to the mortgage. We confirmed Evelyn had no standing to demand anything from me. Most importantly, we confirmed that if Lee filed under the assumptions his mother had fed him, the truth would not just embarrass them, it would cut off the faucet. So when Evelyn sat in my kitchen with divorce papers and that painted little smirk, I already knew something she did not. Lee thought he was leaving me penniless. Evelyn thought she had finally pushed the bank girl out of her son's life. They both thought the $1 million trust fund was waiting behind them like a loaded gun. But I had the real documents in a blue folder upstairs, locked in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, beneath a stack of old birthday cards Lee never opened. Evelyn pushed a pen toward me. "You have until tonight," she said. "Lee will be staying with me while you pack. We expect you to be reasonable." That word almost broke me. Reasonable. The word people use when they have already decided your pain is inconvenient. Lee finally looked up. And for 1 second I searched his face for shame, regret, anything human enough to mourn. All I saw was impatience. "Just sign, Mara," he said. "Don't make this uglier than it has to be." I picked up the pen. Evelyn's smile widened. Lee exhaled like he had survived something. I turned the pen between my fingers and placed it gently back on the table without signing a thing. Then I stood, walked to the sink, and poured my cold coffee down the drain. My hands were steady by then. That surprised me most. When I turned around, Evelyn was still smiling, but not as confidently. "I'll have my attorney review it," I said. Her face tightened. "You don't need an attorney for a simple divorce." I looked at Lee, then at the papers, then back at the woman who had spent 8 years mistaking my silence for permission. "You're right," I said quietly. "This won't be simple." Lee blinked first. Evelyn did not. She leaned back in my chair and let out a soft laugh. The kind people use when they want a room to believe they are still in control. "An attorney," she repeated, as if I had said I wanted a marching band. Mara. Sweetheart. Don't embarrass yourself. Lee's family has handled complicated money for generations. You balance checking accounts for nervous widows. I let the insult pass through me. It was not the first one. It was just the first one she had made while sitting across from the woman who held the key to her son's allowance. Lee rubbed his forehead. Mom. To stop. But he said it without force. Without looking at her. Which meant he did not want her to stop. He wanted her to make the ugly parts happen so he could pretend he was only standing nearby. That had always been his gift. He never swung the knife. He only handed it over. Turned his back. And later asked why there was blood on the floor. Evelyn smiled at him. Proud of his cowardice because it served her. I walked to the hallway closet and took down my gray coat. Evelyn's voice sharpened behind me. Where are you going? I slipped my arms into the sleeves and reached for my bag. To work. I said. It's Tuesday. Lee stared at me like I had violated some rule by continuing my life while they tried to dismantle it. Mara. We need to talk this through. That almost made me laugh. They had arrived with printed divorce papers. A pen. And a deadline. Now suddenly they wanted conversation. There's nothing to talk through without counsel. I said. My voice sounded almost too calm. And that calmness unsettled them more than tears would have. Evelyn stood, smoothing her cream blazer like she was preparing to address a boardroom. You are making a very serious mistake. I picked up the divorce papers, slid them back across the table toward Lee, and said, No. I'm finally refusing to make another one. Then I left my own kitchen while both of them stood there. Stunned by a door closing softly instead of slamming. At work, I made it through 3 client calls, 2 beneficiary updates, and a meeting about a charitable remainder trust without letting my face crack. That is something women learn when their private life is burning and the world still expects competence. You become very good at nodding. You become very good at typing while your chest feels hollow. Around noon, Dana called. I stepped into the stairwell, where the concrete smelled faintly of dust and old rain. They served you personally? She asked. His mother did. I said. Dana was quiet for one beat. Of course she did. I told her exactly what happened. Not emotionally. Exactly. Dates. Words. Poster. The divorce packet. The pressure to sign without legal review. Dana listened the way good attorneys listen. Not interrupting the story just to prove they understand it. When I finished, she said, Do not leave the house voluntarily. Do not sign anything. Do not discuss the trust. Do not warn them. And tonight, take photographs of every room and every valuable item in that home. I looked down the stairwell at the gray steps, spiraling beneath me. You think they'll try something? I asked. I think entitled people become creative when reality begins to threaten them. Dana said. That sentence stayed with me. Creative. Not desperate. Not dangerous. Creative. It was the perfect word for people like Evelyn. She would not break a window. She would call it protecting family property. She would not steal. She would say she was preserving Lee's belongings. She would not lie. She would say she misunderstood. People like Evelyn build escape doors into every sentence before they even speak. When I came home that evening, Lee's car was gone. But Evelyn's perfume still hung in the kitchen like a warning. The divorce papers were not on the table anymore. Neither was the silver serving tray my father had given me when I bought the house. I stood in the dining room for a full minute, noticing what was missing. The tray, 2 crystal candlesticks, a framed photograph from our wedding where Arthur Whitaker had been visible in the background. That last one chilled me more than the silver. Evelyn did not steal memories by accident. I took photos of every room. The empty shelf in the dining room. The drawer, where Lee's passport had been removed. The closet where half his clothes were gone. Though not the expensive coats I had bought him. In the bedroom, his side of the closet looked wounded. Hangers swaying slightly from where someone had pulled too fast. On the bed sat a note in Lee's handwriting. Mara. I need space. Please don't make this a war. I read it twice and felt something inside me go very still. Please don't make this a war. He had brought his mother into my kitchen with divorce papers and threats. But I was the one who might make it a war. That was the Whitaker language. They hit first. Then accused you of bleeding aggressively. I folded the note. Placed it in a clear plastic sleeve from my office bag. And labeled the date. There was no drama in the gesture. Just muscle memory. Documentation is what you do when someone else plans to perform innocence later. That night. Lee called 11 times. I did not answer. Evelyn called twice. I blocked her after the second voicemail began with, "You ungrateful little girl. At Noah, Pisprezeche. M." Lee texted me. "Mom is upset. You embarrassed her. At Noah Dawazech Shidoi." He wrote. "We can still keep this civil if you cooperate. At Noah Patruzech Shi Unu." He wrote. "Don't forget the life you have is because of this family." I stared at that last message until the screen dimmed. Then I saved screenshots to the folder Dana had told me to create. The next morning, a locksmith arrived at 7:30. I had not called one. He stood on my porch with a work order, a tool bag, and the uncomfortable expression of a man realizing he had stepped into someone else's domestic disaster. "Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked. "Yes." He looked at the paper. I was told to change the locks. I opened the door wider but did not let him in. "Who authorized that?" He glanced down. "Mr. Lee Whitaker." The cold that moved through me then was not fear. It was clarity. I told him the property was solely in my name and that no work would be performed. He apologized 3 times before leaving. I photographed the work order number from his clipboard with his permission and sent it to Dana. 10 minutes later, Lee texted, "Why are you being difficult?" That was when I understood he was not confused. He knew the house was mine. He had signed nothing when I bought it. He had simply become so accustomed to benefiting from my patience that he mistook access for ownership. By noon, Dana had filed her notice of representation. By 3, Lee's attorney had contacted her. By 5, the first lie arrived in clean legal language. Lee claimed the house had functioned as a marital asset because he had contributed substantially to its maintenance and improvement. I laughed when Dana read that line over the phone. It came out sharp and ugly. Lee once watched me carry mulch bags from the driveway, while he sat on the porch talking to Evelyn about patio furniture. His contribution had been opinions. Dana asked for records. I had them. Mortgage payments from my account. Repair invoices paid by me. Contractor emails addressed to me. Home insurance in my name. Even the new water heater Lee had bragged about handling had been paid for on my credit card, while he promised to transfer money from his next trust distribution. He never did. I sent Dana the receipts in a zip file called Plaza House. Then I sat at my desk and cried silently for 7 minutes. Not because I was losing him, but because I had spent years begging a man to behave like a partner in a life he was already treating like a hotel. The betrayal became public faster than I expected. Evelyn made sure of it. She told her bridge friends I had become unstable. She told Lee's cousins I was trying to steal family money. One of them, a woman named Caroline who had always been kind in a distant way, called me on a Thursday evening. "Mara," she said carefully, "I don't want to get involved. But Evelyn is saying you're refusing to leave Lee's house." I looked around my living room. At the bookshelves I built. The curtains I hemmed. The floor I had refinished with my father one summer weekend before he died. "That's interesting," I said. "Since Lee never owned it." Caroline went quiet. Then she sighed. I thought something sounded off. I almost told her everything. The trust. Arthur. The documents. The beautiful, terrible truth waiting behind a locked drawer. But Dana's voice lived in my head by then. "Do not warn them." So I only said, "Please be careful what you repeat." Caroline promised she would. 2 days later, Evelyn's stories changed. Now I was not stealing Lee's house. I was weaponizing technicalities. That meant someone had corrected her. And she hated it. Lee came by the following Sunday. He did not knock like a man visiting a house he had left. He used his key. Or tried to. I had not changed the locks yet. But I had added a temporary door brace at night after the locksmith incident. In daylight. The original lock still worked. He stepped inside, carrying a garment bag, and wearing the wounded expression of someone who expected applause for returning. "We need to talk without lawyers," he said. I was standing in the living room with my phone recording in my cardigan pocket. I did not invite him to sit. That mattered. Small things matter when you are teaching your nervous system that the old rules are over. Lee looked around the room, his eyes landing on empty spaces where Evelyn had taken things. "Mom shouldn't have grabbed those pieces," he said. "She was emotional." I waited. He added, "But you know how she gets." There it was again. The family prayer. You know how she gets. As if Evelyn's cruelty was a storm system and all of us were responsible for carrying umbrellas. "What do you want?" "Lee," I asked. He rubbed his jaw. "I want this to be fair." The words sounded rehearsed. "You keep acting like I'm abandoning you. But we've both been unhappy. Mom thinks it's cleaner if we don't drag the family finances into it." He stepped closer. "I'm willing to let you keep some equity in the house if you don't go after my trust." I stared at him. Not because I was shocked by the lie, but because of how easily he offered me crumbs from my own table. "Some equity," I repeated. He nodded, encouraged by my stillness. "I mean, we built this life together." I thought of the mortgage statements, the missed transfers, the way he had called my job small while eating food bought with my salary, and the trust I asked. He straightened a little. There it was. The crown returning to his head. "That's separate family property," he said. "You wouldn't understand all the details. But it's protected." My phone felt heavy in my pocket, catching every word. I almost told him then. I almost opened the drawer, took out the blue folder, and watched his face drain of color in my living room. But victory offered too early can become evidence of emotion instead of truth. So I did what Dana had told me to do. I let him talk. Lee explained that Evelyn believed I should waive any claim to spousal support, reimburse certain family advances, and agree not to contact the trustee about distributions. He spoke like a man describing weather, not extortion. When he finished, I asked one question. "Did your attorney advise you to say that?" His mouth tightened. "Don't twist things." "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I'm asking whether your attorney told you to come here and pressure me not to contact a trustee." For the first time, fear crossed his face. Not much. Just enough. He looked toward the front window, as if Evelyn might be parked outside waiting for a report. "Mom said you'd try to make me look bad," he muttered. "You're really proving her right." He left after 20 minutes, angry that I had not performed the devastated wife correctly. The moment his car pulled away, I locked the door, removed the phone from my pocket, and listened to the recording. My own voice sounded calm. His sounded entitled, careless, and afraid in all the places that mattered. I sent it to Dana. She called back quickly. "This is useful," she said. "Very useful." I sat down on the bottom stair, the same stair where Lee used to leave his gym bag, and pressed my palm over my eyes. The next blow came through money. Lee stopped paying the few household bills he had finally agreed to cover during our separation, including the car insurance on the vehicle he drove and the family phone plan still under my name. Then he sent me a spreadsheet titled Proposed Settlement. He wanted half the appreciation on my house, half my retirement growth during the marriage, and reimbursement for emotional damages caused by marital hostility. I read that phrase 3 times. Emotional damages. From the man whose mother had thrown divorce papers at me over coffee. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, he added one final line. Trust distributions not subject to division. I forwarded it to Dana with no commentary. She replied with a single sentence, Let them keep building the record. So I did. I paid what protected my credit, canceled what I legally could, removed Lee from shared services, and moved my direct deposit to a new account. Each step felt small, almost boring. But boring is how you survive the days after betrayal. You wash cups. You scan documents. You sleep badly. You wake up anyway. Evelyn responded to my silence by escalating. She came to my workplace lobby on a Friday afternoon wearing pearls and fury. Security called upstairs because she was demanding to see me and telling anyone within earshot that I was holding family documents hostage. My manager, Priya, looked at me through the glass wall of my office. She knew enough to know this was personal and serious. "You don't have to go down," she said. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and said, "No, but I think I should." The lobby was bright, marble, and full of people pretending not to listen. Evelyn stood near the reception desk, clutching her handbag with both hands. The moment she saw me, she smiled for the audience. "Mara," she said loudly, "this has gone too far." I stopped several feet away. "You need to leave." Her smile hardened. "Lee is being generous. You are not family anymore. Whatever Arthur left belongs to blood." At Arthur's name, my stomach tightened. But my face did not move. "You should speak with Lee's attorney," I said. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it uglier. "Do you really think a girl like you gets to walk into our family and walk out with anything?" There it was. The sentence beneath every dinner, every smile, every correction, every little humiliation. "A girl like you." I looked at the security guard standing behind her, then at Priya, who had come down without my asking. "Please escort Mrs. Whitaker out," I said. Evelyn's face changed. Not crumbled. Not yet. But cracked. She was used to rooms bending around her performance. Used to people smoothing over her behavior because she was older, wealthy-looking, and fluent in respectability. Being removed from a bank lobby by a security guard did not fit the role she had written for herself. She pointed at me with one trembling finger. "You will regret humiliating me," she said. I believed her. Not because she had power, but because she still thought she did. That evening, Dana sent Lee's attorney a formal preservation letter, including notice that intimidation, unauthorized entry attempts, and third-party workplace harassment were being documented. She did not mention the trust transfer clause yet. She only requested complete disclosure of all financial claims Lee intended to make, including any trust documents he planned to rely upon. It was a trap made of professionalism. A clean one. The kind greedy people walk into because they cannot imagine the quiet woman has already read the ending. For 3 days. Nothing happened. No calls. No texts. No surprise visits. The silence felt less like peace than a held breath. On the 4th morning, Dana forwarded me a message from Lee's attorney. Attached was a partial copy of the Whitaker Trust summary. The version Lee and Evelyn had been waving around for years. It described Lee as an income beneficiary. It omitted every clause that mattered. No remainder ownership. No misconduct suspension. No protection, trust. No mention of me. Dana's message beneath it was brief. They produced the wrong document. I sat in my office staring at those words, feeling the story shift beneath my feet. Until then, the trust had been my shield. Now it was becoming their trap. Someone had given Lee a summary that made him feel rich but not responsible. Someone had allowed Evelyn to believe proximity was ownership. Maybe they had never read the full amendment. Maybe they had read it and assumed I never would. Either way, they had built their arrogance on an edited page. That night, I opened the blue folder again. Arthur's signature sat at the bottom of the amendment, thin but firm. I ran one finger near it without touching the ink. The document did not feel like a miracle. It felt like a warning written by a man who knew his family better than they knew themselves. He had not saved me because I was special. He had protected the trust because he had seen what entitlement does when nobody locks the door. At zech trazich she chasse pas. M. Lee texted me for the first time in nearly a week. Mom says we're having a family meeting Sunday at her house. Be there if you want this resolved. I looked at the message. Then at the blue folder on my desk. There are moments when the past knocks. Expecting the same woman to answer, I typed back only 4 words. I'll bring my attorney. Sunday arrived with the strange calm of a day that had already decided what it would become. I dressed the way I did for difficult client meetings: black trousers, ivory blouse, low heels, hair pulled back. No jewelry except my father's watch. Not armor exactly. More like a reminder. My father had been a school principal. Not a rich man. But he believed dignity was something you practiced before anyone tested it. Dana picked me up at 1:40. And the blue folder sat between us in the car like a sealed verdict. Evelyn's house looked exactly as it always had. Which somehow made it worse. Red brick. White columns. Brass, lion knocker. Boxwoods trimmed into obedient little shapes. The Whitaker home was built to announce permanence. But once you knew where to look, you could see the rot behind the polish. One shutter hung slightly crooked. The porch paint was peeling near the steps. The gutters sagged on the left side. It was a house performing wealth. Just like the people inside it. Lee opened the door before we knocked. He had shaved, combed his hair, and put on the gray blazer he wore whenever he wanted to seem responsible. His eyes went straight to Dana, then to the folder in her hand. I thought this was supposed to be a family meeting, he said. Dana smiled politely. Then you should not have invited a woman you are divorcing to a hostile financial discussion. Lee's mouth tightened. He stepped aside. And I walked into the house where I had swallowed 8 years of insults under the chandelier. Evelyn was waiting in the formal living room, like a judge who had already written the sentence. She sat on the blue velvet sofa with a legal pad on her lap, pearls at her throat, and my father's silver tray on the coffee table between 2 untouched glasses of water. Seeing it there almost knocked the breath out of me. Not because it was expensive. It was not. Because she had taken it from my dining room and placed it in hers as if stealing from me was just another kind of decorating. Caroline sat near the window, looking uncomfortable. Lee's cousin Mark stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, trying to appear neutral in the way men do when neutrality benefits the loudest person. An older family accountant named Mr. Voss sat beside Evelyn with a folder of his own. I recognized him from past Christmas parties, where he had always treated me like a guest who should not wander too far from the appetizers. Evelyn lifted her chin. Good. You came. Now perhaps we can end this circus. Dana and I sat in 2 chairs opposite them. I did not touch the water. Evelyn's eyes flicked to my hands, maybe hoping to see them tremble. They did not. She began with a speech about family reputation, about Lee's future, about how divorces could become unnecessarily destructive when one party refused to accept reality. Every word was polished, smooth. Not one of them was true. Mara needs to understand, she said, turning toward Dana, that the Whitaker trust predates this marriage. It is not hers, and it will never be hers. Dana did not respond right away. That was one of her strengths. Silence makes arrogant people keep talking. Evelyn filled it immediately. She said I had benefited from Lee's family name. She said I had lived above my station. She said I was now trying to punish a good man because our marriage had naturally reached its conclusion. Lee stared at his hands. When she said, "good man," he did not flinch. That told me something. Shame had left the room before I arrived. Mr. Voss cleared his throat and opened his folder. For efficiency, he said, we have prepared a settlement framework based on the assumption that Mrs. Whitaker will waive any claim, direct or indirect, related to Lee's trust distributions. He slid a document across the coffee table. Dana did not pick it up. I looked at the top page and saw the words, mutual confidentiality and non-disparagement agreement. Beneath that, in smaller print, was a clause requiring me not to contact any trustee, attorney, advisor, or institution related to Whitaker family assets. It was not a settlement. It was a gag order wearing a clean suit. Evelyn watched my face as if waiting for panic to surface. You see, she said softly, we are still willing to be generous. You sign this today, and Lee will not pursue his full claim against your house. My house. She said it with the confidence of someone who had repeated the lie until it became furniture in her mind. The silver tray caught the light between us, and suddenly I knew exactly what the center of the story had always been. I looked at Lee. Did you read this? He shifted. It's standard. That wasn't my question. His jaw worked once. My attorney reviewed it. Dana leaned slightly forward. Lee's attorney reviewed a document prepared by your mother's accountant. The room went quiet. Mr. Voss adjusted his glasses. I am assisting the family in an informal capacity. Dana nodded. That is an interesting phrase. We'll return to it. Evelyn's nails clicked against her legal pad. We are not here to be interrogated. No, I said. My voice sounded soft. Even to me. You're here because you thought I would be afraid. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. For 8 years, I had let her mistake restraint for fear because correcting her never seemed worth the cost. But sitting there, looking at my father's tray on her table, I realized the cost of silence had been accumulating in hidden places. In my shoulders, in my sleep, in the way I apologized before asking for basic respect. Some debts are paid with money, others are paid with your own disappearance. Caroline glanced at me. Then at the tray. I saw recognition move across her face. She had been at my house enough times to know where it belonged. Evelyn saw the glance and quickly placed her hand on the tray's rim. Possessive and stupid. Sentimental items can be discussed separately, she said. Right now, we are discussing real assets. Dana opened her leather portfolio and removed a single sheet. Not the whole trust amendment. Not yet. Just the property records for my house. Let's begin with the house. Dana said. Mara purchased the Plaza Midwood property before marriage. The deed is solely in her name. The mortgage has been paid from her separate account. Lee's documented financial contributions are minimal. Irregular. And in several cases reimbursed by Mara. Any claim to half the property is weak at best. Mr. Voss frowned at his papers. Evelyn waved one hand. Marriages are partnerships. I looked at Lee. That would have been nice. Lee's face flushed. You're making me sound like I did nothing. No. I said. Your records are doing that. It landed harder than I expected. He looked away. And for a moment, I saw the man I had married. Not innocent. Not cruel in the theatrical way his mother was. But hollowed out by years of being excused from accountability. Evelyn had protected him from discomfort until discomfort began to feel like injustice. That was its own kind of damage. But it was not mine to repair anymore. Dana slid another document forward. Now let's discuss harassment. Unauthorized locksmith request. Workplace confrontation. Removal of personal property from Mara's home. Pressure to sign legal documents without counsel. Recorded statements advising her not to contact a trustee. Lee jerked his head up. Recorded Evelyn's hand froze on the tray. Dana looked at him calmly. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. Lee's face lost color in a slow, uneven way. It was the first time he understood that his words had not evaporated just because he regretted them. Evelyn recovered faster than he did. That is disgusting. She snapped. Recording your own husband, I looked at her. Bringing divorce papers into my kitchen and threatening me with poverty was not intimate communication. Evelyn. It was strategy. I treated it like strategy. Caroline looked down at her lap, hiding something that might have been a smile. Mark shifted near the fireplace. Mr. Voss closed his folder halfway. As if the paperwork inside had become less friendly, then Evelyn made the mistake Dana had predicted. She leaned forward and said, None of this changes the trust. Lee has resources you cannot touch. Arthur made sure of that. She said Arthur's name like a shield. But Arthur had not built a shield for her. He had built a lock. I felt Dana's glance. A silent question. Not yet. Now I gave the smallest nod. My pulse was steady. Not calm exactly, but steady. There are moments when fear burns itself down into something cleaner. Dana removed the first page from the blue folder and placed it on the coffee table. This is the full Second Amendment to the Arthur B. Whitaker Family Trust. Executed 16 months before Mr. Whitaker's death. Mr. Voss leaned forward sharply. Evelyn stared at the page as if it had been written in another language. Lee frowned. What is that? He asked. Dana did not answer him. She turned the document so Mr. Voss could read the heading. Date. And notarized seal. I assume you recognize the instrument. Mr. Voss's face changed in a way no actor could fake. His eyebrows pulled together first. Then his mouth parted slightly. Then he looked at Evelyn. Not with loyalty, but with alarm. Evelyn, he said quietly. Where did you get the summary you provided me? Evelyn's expression hardened. From family files. Not this version, he said. The room shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But everyone felt it. The polished furniture. The old portraits. The chandelier. The silver tray between us. All of it suddenly looked like scenery before a storm. Lee stood. Can somebody explain what's going on? His voice cracked on the last word. For years, the trust had been a magic word that ended arguments. Now it had become a locked door. And he had just realized he did not have the key. Dana placed a second page beside the first. Lee is an income beneficiary under conditions, she said. He is not the owner of the trust principal. He does not control the trust. Evelyn has no authority over the trust. And certain actions, including financial coercion connected to marital abandonment, trigger, review, and possible suspension. Evelyn laughed once. Too loud. That is absurd. Dana continued as if Evelyn had not spoken. The amendment also establishes a family protection trust in the event of misconduct, waste, or attempted dissolution of marriage for financial advantage. Lee gripped the back of his chair. Protection for who? The answer sat in the air before anyone said it. Dana looked at me. Then back at him. Mara was named successor trustee for that structure. Under certain conditions. She is also the designated beneficiary of the remainder interest. Caroline whispered. Oh my God. Mark stopped pretending to be neutral. Mr. Voss removed his glasses and rubbed both eyes. Evelyn did not crumble yet. She rejected reality first. No, she said. Arthur would never. But I remembered Arthur watching her interrupt me over chicken salad. I remembered his bright eyes. Families behave worst around money. Dana slid the signature page forward. Arthur's name sat there in black ink. Patient and final. Evelyn stared at it. And the color rose in her neck before draining from her face. Lee looked at me like I had betrayed him by knowing the truth. That is how entitled people experience consequences. They mistake exposure for harm. You knew? He asked. The room went very still. I thought about lying gently. Softening the moment. Making myself smaller out of habit. Instead, I told the truth. I found out after your grandfather's retired attorney contacted me. I verified it before your mother came to my kitchen. His eyes widened. And you let us keep talking, yes, I said. You were finally being honest. Evelyn pushed herself to her feet. Her legal pad slid to the floor. You manipulated this family. Dana's voice sharpened for the first time. Mrs. Whitaker. Sit down. Evelyn ignored her and pointed at me. You think this makes you one of us. You think Arthur choosing you changes what you are. The old sentence was coming. I could feel it. A girl like you. But this time, it would not find the same wound. I stood too. Slowly. No. I said. It proves Arthur knew exactly what you were. That silenced her. Not because it was loud. Because it was clean. Lee's breathing sounded uneven. Mr. Voss began gathering his papers with the careful movements of a man trying not to be professionally attached to a sinking ship. Dana placed one final document on the table, a formal notice of trustee review and distribution suspension, pending investigation. This will be served through proper channels tomorrow, she said. Given today's attempted coercion, the recording, the incomplete trust summary, and the settlement demand restricting trustee contact, we will request immediate suspension of discretionary distributions. Lee sat down hard. For the first time since I had known him, he looked young. Not innocent. Young. As if the life built around him had disappeared and left him without instructions. Mara, he said. And my name sounded different in his mouth now. Smaller. Useful. You can't do that. I looked at him across the silver tray. Across 8 years. Across every time he had let his mother cut me and called my bleeding sensitivity. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm refusing to keep funding what you did to me. Evelyn's knees seemed to weaken. But pride held her upright a few seconds longer. Then she reached for the arm of the sofa and lowered herself onto it. The smirk was gone. Not softened. Gone. In its place was something raw and frightened. The expression of a woman who had built her entire authority on access to money she never owned. The $1 million trust had been her stage. Her script. Her weapon. And now, the curtain had been pulled back in front of everyone she had invited to watch me lose. Dana closed the blue folder. We are finished for today. I picked up my father's silver tray from the coffee table. Evelyn's head snapped up. That belongs, she stopped herself. Everyone heard the unfinished lie. I held the tray against my side and looked around the room one last time. The portraits. The velvet sofa. The polished wood. The people who had gathered to witness my humiliation and instead witnessed the first consequence. At the door. Lee followed me into the hallway. Mara, he said again. This time there was panic in it. Please. Can we talk alone? I turned back. Behind him. Evelyn sat frozen on the sofa. One hand pressed to her throat. No, I said. You had 8 years to talk to me alone. His face twisted. I made mistakes. You made choices. That distinction mattered more than any document in Dana's folder. Mistakes are dropped glasses. Choices are patterns you protect until they stop benefiting you. He reached for my wrist. Then stopped before touching me. Some part of him still knew my boundaries had changed. What am I supposed to do if they suspend the distributions? He asked. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I hurt you. Not, my mother was wrong. Just the question at the center of him. Finally stripped bare. What am I supposed to do without the money? I looked at the man I had loved. And grief moved through me without asking permission. Then it passed. I don't know. Lee, I said. Maybe get a job. Dana opened the front door. And afternoon light spilled into the hallway. I stepped onto Evelyn's porch carrying my father's tray and the part of myself I had left behind in that family years ago. No one followed us down the steps. Behind me, through the open door, I heard Evelyn's voice break for the first time. Dee Lee. What did you do? I did not turn around. The answer was finally not mine to manage. The notice went out Monday morning before Lee had time to rewrite himself as a victim. Dana sent it through every proper channel. Clean and cold. With attachments named like ordinary paperwork instead of grenades. By noon. Lee's attorney requested a call. By 2. Mr. Calder confirmed receipt on behalf of the trust records. By 4. The corporate trustee issued a temporary hold on discretionary distributions, pending review. I read the email twice in my office. Then closed my laptop gently. No cheering. No victory dance. Just one long breath I had been holding for 8 years. Lee called me within minutes. I did not answer. Then he texted. Mara. Please. Then. This is my life. Then, Mom is spiraling. Then, we need money for the house. I stared at that last one with a strange, distant sadness. Even after everything. He still called Evelyn's house, the house. As if it were an institution the world was obligated to preserve. He never asked how I was. He never said he was sorry. The first language he reached for was need. And he expected me to translate it into rescue. Dana told me not to respond unless she approved the message. So I wrote nothing. Silence had once been something I used to survive their rooms. Now, it became a boundary. That difference changed the feel of it in my body. It was no longer a swallowed scream. It was a locked door. Lee's messages stacked up through the evening, growing softer as the hours passed. By midnight, he sent one that said, "I know Mom went too far." That was as close as he came to naming the truth. And even then, he placed the blame where he always had beside himself. Never inside himself. The formal review happened 10 days later in a conference room downtown. Not in a courtroom. Not in some dramatic hall with a judge and a gavel. Just a long table. Gray carpet. Bottled water. And documents arranged in folders. That made it worse for Evelyn. I think. She had always been good in emotional theaters. Where tone and tears could bend people. But administrative rooms do not care about trembling voices. They care about dates, signatures, account activity. And whether somebody tried to pressure a trustee into silence. Lee arrived with Evelyn and his attorney. Evelyn wore navy this time instead of cream. As if darker fabric could make her seem more serious. She did not look at me when she entered. Lee did. His face had changed in 10 days. Not dramatically. But enough. The softness of comfort had started to leave him. His eyes looked restless. His mouth tight. His confidence patched together with sleeplessness. He sat across from me. And for the first time in our marriage, he looked like a man who might have to explain himself without his mother finishing the sentence. The trustee's representative, Ms. A. Arlen, began with a neutral summary. Lee was an income beneficiary. The trust principle was protected. Discretionary distributions depended on compliance with responsibility clauses. The amendment granted the trustee authority to suspend payments in cases of coercion, waste, or attempts to manipulate marital dissolution for financial advantage. Her voice never rose. She did not need it to. Every sentence removed another brick from the wall Lee and Evelyn had built around themselves. Then Dana presented the record. The incomplete trust summary. The proposed gag agreement. The locksmith order. The workplace confrontation. The recorded conversation in my living room. Lee closed his eyes when his own voice filled the conference room speaker. "I'm willing to let you keep some equity in the house if you don't go after my trust." No one gasped. No one shouted. That was the power of it. The words sounded smaller when played back. But uglier too. Stripped of the confidence he had worn while saying them, Evelyn interrupted halfway through. "He was emotional," she said. "Ms." Harlan looked at her over the top of her glasses. "Mrs. Whitaker. You are not the beneficiary under review." Evelyn's lips parted. She was not used to being legally irrelevant. Socially, she had trained rooms to orbit her. Financially, she had lived for years as if Lee's access made her powerful. But on paper, where her tone could not help her, she was almost nothing. That realization moved across her face like a shadow. Lee's attorney tried to argue that there had been misunderstanding, family tension, and poor communication. He admitted the settlement language had been overbroad. He called the attempt to change my locks an unfortunate misstep. Dana did not argue with adjectives. She answered with documents. My deed. My mortgage records. The work order. The voicemail from Evelyn, calling me ungrateful. The text where Lee wrote, "Don't forget the life you have is because of this family." Ms. Harlan read that one silently. Her expression did not change. But she wrote something down. When it was my turn to speak, I had prepared a statement. 2 pages. Typed. Revised. Trimmed until every sentence carried weight. But when I looked across the table at Lee, then at Evelyn, then at the blue folder in front of Dana, I realized I did not want to perform pain for people who had already consumed. So I folded the pages in half and placed them beside my water. I don't want revenge, I said. I want the trust to stop being used as a weapon against me. Lee looked down. Evelyn looked furious, which told me she still thought the weapon was hers. I continued. Slowly. Because I wanted every word to land clean. For years, Lee represented the trust as personal wealth when it benefited him, and separate family property when accountability appeared. Evelyn used that belief to threaten me, pressure me, and humiliate me. I am not asking anyone to punish them for being unhappy with me. I am asking that the documents be enforced exactly as Arthur Whitaker wrote them. Miss Harlan nodded once. Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. That was all. No applause. No dramatic collapse. Just the quiet machinery of consequence beginning to move. The trustee ruled that discretionary distributions to Lee would remain suspended for 6 months, pending financial compliance. Independent counseling documentation. And a full accounting of trust-funded expenditures that had been diverted to Evelyn's personal expenses. Lee's face went slack. Evelyn whispered. 6 months, as if someone had announced a prison sentence instead of the temporary loss of money she had never earned. The remainder and protection clauses would remain in place. I would not receive a sudden suitcase full of cash. Real life is rarely that theatrical. But the principal was protected from Lee's claims. Evelyn's pressure. And any attempt to use the divorce to force access. If misconduct continued, the trustee could extend the suspension and accelerate the protection trust provisions. In plain language, the faucet had been shut off. The lock had been tested. And the key was no longer in the hands of the people who thought cruelty counted as ownership. After the meeting, Lee followed me into the hallway. Dana stayed close but let him speak. He looked smaller under fluorescent light. Mara, he said. I didn't know Mom was going to go that far. I looked at him for a long moment. There are sentences people use when they want innocence without confession. I didn't know. I didn't mean. I was under pressure. They may be partly true. They may even contain regret. But regret that arrives only after consequences is not the same as remorse. You knew enough, I said. He swallowed. I loved you. That hurt, because I believed. In some weak and unfinished way. He had. But love without courage had left me standing alone too many times. Love that waits for permission from a mother like Evelyn becomes another form of abandonment. Maybe you did, I said. But you loved your comfort more. He flinched then. And I knew the sentence had found the place he avoided most. Evelyn came out of the conference room behind him, gripping her handbag like a flotation device. Her eyes went to me. Then to Dana. Then to the elevator. The smirk from my kitchen was gone forever. What remained was not humility. It was rage without leverage. Arthur was manipulated, she said. But her voice lacked its old polish. I almost answered. I almost told her Arthur had simply seen her clearly. Instead, I let the silence do what it had learned to do. I let it stand upright between us. The divorce settled faster after that. Lee withdrew his claim against my house when his attorney realized the numbers made him look worse with every document request. I kept my home, my retirement, my father's silver tray, and the right to close my door without explaining why. Lee kept his car until he could no longer afford the lease. Evelyn sold jewelry first. Then quietly listed the brick house with the white columns. Caroline told me later the family was shocked. I was not. Houses built on performance are expensive to maintain when the audience leaves. I did not ruin Lee. That distinction mattered to me. I did not call his friends. I did not post screenshots. I did not send Evelyn's voicemail to her bridge club. Though some tired, petty part of me wanted to. Consequences did not require my decoration. The truth had enough teeth on its own. Lee eventually took a job in operations at a logistics company outside Raleigh. Caroline said he looked tired but steadier. I hoped that was true. I did not need him destroyed. I needed him removed from the part of my life where peace was supposed to live. Evelyn wrote me one letter 6 months later. Not an apology. People like her rarely begin there. It was 3 pages of blame dressed as reflection. She said Arthur's decision had wounded the family. She said I could have handled things privately. She said she hoped I understood one day that mothers sometimes act fiercely for their children. I read the letter at my kitchen table. The same table where she had thrown the divorce papers. And when I finished, I placed it in the shredder without saving a copy. The kitchen was different by then. I had painted the walls a soft green and replaced the chairs Evelyn used to criticize. The silver tray sat on the sideboard again. Polished but not too polished. Because my father had always said, useful things should look touched by life. On Sunday mornings, sunlight hit the tray and scattered across the room in small, bright pieces. For a while, I thought seeing it would remind me of theft. Instead, it reminded me that stolen things can come home. And so can stolen parts of yourself. People ask sometimes if I felt powerful when Evelyn crumbled. The honest answer is no. Power did not feel like watching her lose. It felt like not rushing to soften the loss for her. It felt like letting Lee face a life his money had postponed. It felt like telling my attorney the truth without apologizing for how ugly it sounded. It felt like sleeping through the night in a house nobody could enter with a key they did not deserve. I learned that a family can use beautiful words to hide terrible habits. Fairness can mean obedience. Loyalty can mean silence. Forgiveness can mean letting the same person cut you again because they dislike the consequences of the first wound. But real love does not require you to be penniless, voiceless, or grateful for crumbs from your own table. Real love does not throw papers at you and call the threat generosity. I also learned that quiet is not always weakness. Sometimes quiet is the sound of a woman reading the whole document. Sometimes it is a folder waiting in a drawer. Sometimes it is a breath taken before the sentence that changes the room. Evelyn thought she had cornered me because I did not scream. Lee thought I would stay afraid because I had stayed kind. They both mistook my restraint for emptiness. When really, I was full of every truth they had forced me to carry alone. The last time I saw Lee was outside the courthouse after the divorce was finalized. He looked at me like he wanted to say something permanent. Something that would make the ending feel less ordinary. But endings are often ordinary. A signature. A hallway. A woman walking to her car alone and realizing alone no longer feels like abandonment. He said, "Take care, Mara." I nodded and said, "You too." Then I left before either of us could turn grief into another negotiation. That night, I came home, set my keys in the blue bowl by the door, and stood in my kitchen while the house settled around me. No Evelyn. No Lee. No footsteps upstairs that made my shoulders tighten. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the old floorboard near the laundry room, and the silver tray catching the lamplight. I thought about the divorce papers sliding across the table. I thought about that smirk. I thought about the trust they believed would make me leave with nothing. Then I made coffee. Sat in my own chair. And understood something I wish I had known years earlier. Leaving with nothing is not the worst thing that can happen to a woman. The worst thing is staying where people keep convincing her she is nothing. Evelyn expected me to walk away penniless. Instead, I walked away with my house, my name, my peace, and the truth Arthur had locked inside $1 million trust. The people who live off your silence are the first to crumble when you finally stop giving it to them.